Well, hello and welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. As always, you can interact with us on our social media platforms at The Week Ahead or using that hashtag The Week Ahead. For now, though, I am your host, Liezle Wilson. Let's take a look at some of those headlines. The African National Congress Interim Provincial Committee in the Northwest postpones the conference due to disputes. Inquiry into state captures expected to submit the final volumes of its report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Members of the World Trade Organization pledges to ensure food security amid soaring prices and trade disruptions following the COVID-19 pandemic. Right, in news just in, we've seen the ANC in the Northwest has postponed its 9th provincial elective conference, which was due to be held later this week. The conference is now expected to take place in August to allow for branch dispute appeal processes to be carried out. The ANC's Northwest Interim Provincial Coordinator, Hlomani Chauke, addressed the media in Rustenburg early on.
The IPC has resolved to postpone the provincial conference to allow for the dispute resolution process to run its course, to include the possible of appeal process, which we have already said that the appeal process will then be lodged with the national office. The postponement will also pave the way for BBGMs, which have been ordered for the rerun process emanating from the PDRC. The IPC has resolved that the provincial conference should convene by not later than the second week of August. Discussion document currently the process that we are embarking on in terms of the preparations for the policy conference, that the discussion is taking place between ourselves and the national deployees, including the Office of the Secretary General, to agree on such a proposal that the IPC has put forward. The IPC firmly committed to ensuring that all disputes are amicably resolved and legitimately delegate chosen by branches to participate in the provincial and the regional conference.
Right, now in other news, the inquiry into state capture will submit the final volumes of its report to President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening. The Commission of Inquiry failed to meet a deadline to submit the final installment by the extended June 15th deadline. The Commission says that certain challenges prevented it from submitting the final part on time. The Commission will submit the electronic version of the report to the President this evening, and a formal handover ceremony will be taking place at the Union Buildings in Pretoria tomorrow evening. Part 5 includes investigations into the SABC, the State Security Agency, Estina Dairy Farm, Waterkloof landing by associates of the Gupta family, and the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa. While staying with legal matters, Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandisa Maya is set to be interviewed for the position of Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court on Monday. The position became vacant when Justice Raymond Zondo took the helm at the Apex Court earlier this year. The Judicial Service Commission nominated Maya for the Chief Justice position after its week-long interview process. SABC reporter Hasina Gori.
Mandisa Maya is a pioneer in the legal field and a woman of first. She was one of the first women judges in the Eastern Cape High Court, the first black woman in the Supreme Court of Appeal, the first deputy president of that court, and later its president, and now set to be the first woman deputy chief justice of the country, while other women have acted in the position as recently as Justice Sisi Kampepe last year. Maya would be the first to officially occupy the seat. Born in rural Eastern Cape, the trailblazer worked as a court interpreter and prosecutor before joining the Women's Legal Defense in Washington, D.C. As the country transitioned to democracy, Maya worked as an investigator for the Independent Electoral Commission. She practiced as an advocate before becoming a High Court judge. Maya then moved through the appellate divisions and acted at the Concourt as well. She's a firm advocate for more women on the bench.
There is no shortage of magistrates who are judicial officers right at the coalface of disputes. There are women academics, and I think we have not tapped enough.
At the helm of the SCA, she has turned the appellate court into one of the most efficient in the country. During her interview for Chief Justice position earlier this year, Maya urged the Commission to consider her skills rather than her gender. In April, President Cyril Ramaphosa nominated Maya for the position of Deputy Chief Justice, which she subsequently accepted, and is now set to be interviewed once again by the Judicial Service Commission.
I'm not good because I'm a woman. I'm just a good woman judge.
Hasina Gori, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Ritumetsi Piri, an attorney and legal expert, rather, to give us more on this. A very good afternoon to you, Ritumetsi. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
It's a pleasure, and good afternoon to you and your viewers.
Well, you're looking mighty warm on your side. Let's get into the conversation. Tomorrow, Justice Mandisa Maya will interview as a sole candidate for the Deputy Chief Justice position. And, as we heard, if appointed, she will be the first woman to be appointed. Perhaps let's talk about these dynamics, the changes in the judiciary, and the rate of transformation for us to get to this juncture, ahead of her interview tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, the president has been clear that he intends to appoint her into that position. He's obviously consulting the Judicial Services Commission, as well as the leaders of the various political parties, as he's required in terms of the Constitution. But, we heard that little clip where she said, she just happens to be a good woman judge. And I think that's first and foremost what we should recognize her for. She writes impeccable judgments. I think she has about 200 plus reported judgments that are exceptionally good. The Supreme Court of Appeal is a high-performing court, so administratively, she's proven herself from that perspective. I think the office of the Deputy Chief Justice does require a few more components, which I'm very excited to hear her talk through. We expect her to be the chairperson of the Judicial Conduct Committee, which is effectively a disciplinary committee within the judiciary, within her role as Deputy Chief Justice. So I'd love to hear more around how she sees herself participating in those particular roles, which she wouldn't have traversed in her Chief Justice interview, because obviously, the role might seem familiar or rather similar, but the roles differ in some respects as well. But certainly a very credible, strong lawyer and administrator within the court system who I think the country will benefit from as having as Deputy Chief Justice.
Let's get into some of those dynamics you've just alluded to. We've seen the conduct of her interview during the Chief Justice position, and I wonder if you could then speak to what the expectations are from this interview. Obviously, questioning whether we're going to be hearing anything new. I'm asking this also because, the focus of the role of the Deputy Chief Justice comes strongly into the fore. And, I wonder what her qualities are that make her right and fit for this job at this juncture, given the internal and external dynamics at the judiciary currently.
Yeah, so I think we are going to hear a few of, similar type of questions. Hopefully this time we are really going to focus on her professional capabilities. I think, with respect to her interview, unfortunately, some of the commissioners, I think, were just guilty of just not really testing her credentials as much as some of the other judges. So I'm expecting this time around, given the dynamic of the Deputy Chief Justice position, that we would test that. I'm expecting, she has a very strong vision for the judiciary that she shared in her Chief Justice interview. I'm expecting that to be touched on again, particularly given that Chief Justice Zondo has approximately 2 years or so left in his term. So this is the person we should be expecting to be Chief Justice once Chief Justice Zondo leaves that position. And I'm expecting to hear a lot more about her vision for the judiciary as she's done. The Chief Justice role tends to be quite ceremonial in instances. It tends to be quite bureaucratic, as the head for the courts, etc. So I think those kind of questions will probably not necessarily be touched on, but certainly a lot of her academic and legal acumen. I expect to hear some of the judges and the judgments she's taken us through. There was a dissenting judgment she wrote within the Supreme Court of Appeal, which ultimately got upheld in the Constitutional Court. So she's shown herself to actually just not be afraid to be alone in her intellectual rigor. And I expect those kind of aspects to really be teased out and showed to us during the interview tomorrow.
As a legal practitioner, what are some of the changes that you're looking forward to, perhaps as she comes to occupy this position? What are some of the challenges, the short-term changes that need to happen, perhaps as we look into the long-term as well?
Yeah, I mean, she has really expanded the participation of women within the judiciary, and she's, not non-apologetic about that as something that she really wants to continue expanding. I think that is exciting as a legal practitioner. I think it's exciting to have a person in a senior Deputy Chief Justice role, given how the courts function, especially the lower courts. We heard in that little clip she was speaking about the, dispensing of justice at the coalface of justice. And I really look forward to quite a strong professional direction from her with respect to how we actually work in the lower courts in particular. The high courts tend to be generally quite efficient, but I'm pretty certain having her in that role, we are going to see more efficient courts in this country, over and above just the generally good legal jurisprudence we've come to expect from her and the Constitutional Court so far.
Rita Metsi, thank you very much for that analysis. I don't want to let you go, perhaps by just quickly taking a look at the state capture report that's obviously set to be handed over tonight, and that ceremony tomorrow. I mean, 4 parts of the State Capture Commission report have already come out. It's the final installment, rather. And I wonder, in your analysis, do you expect it to be as explosive as the previously released reports? I mean, this one is in particular going to be focusing on issues, related to the SABC, their state security, amongst others.
Yeah, I'm certainly, looking forward to matters relating to the State Security Agency. I think we heard some really shocking testimony at the State Capture Commission around how those agencies were hollowed out and captured for nefarious ends. So I'm really looking forward to seeing, what are the recommendations around that, because that is a central pillar of our democracy. And to the extent it has been subverted, from what we've heard, I'm glad that we now have a report that will deal with those facts, in a determinative way and make recommendations around how we should proceed from here, especially on those particular aspects. So I am expecting that piece to be explosive, given what we know is happening in the country, for instance, with Parapara and Arthur Fraser, so I am expecting that piece of the report will certainly have our eyebrows. We're actually going to be quite surprised by what we see there.
No, well, speaking of which, there's obviously recommendations and enforcement that needs to happen. There's also been the overall cost to date that has impacted the taxpayer largely. And with these delays, I wonder if you could also then just speak to how this is going to impact, Parliament and law enforcement agencies going forward, who ultimately then now have to do the work, in response to the findings of this Sondo Commission.
Sure. So, I think the work of the Commission has been, really important for the country. And it is a pity in some respects that the word delays, but I think the product that we're seeing and the output is really important. And I take heart at what the President Cyril Ramaphosa has said around, is going to process this report as quickly as possible and have it in Parliament, insofar as at least a plan for processing these recommendations. The National Prosecuting Authority has also said we're going to start seeing seminal cases, which we have. I think it's great that the Guptas are being extradited, and that process is underway as well. So I think we are starting to see a concerted push to getting some momentum behind some of the recommendations of the Commission. I'm looking forward to seeing the President's plan for how to implement the recommendations and for that being dealt with in Parliament. And obviously, more than anything else, I'm looking forward for the NPA shifting the gear on these prosecutions that they have promised us.
Ritumetse Phiri, thank you very much for your time and your analysis. Attorney Ritumetse Phiri chatting to us about the inevitable state capture report that is set to be handed over to the President online today. And of course, that ceremony taking place tomorrow, as well as Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandisa Maya set to be interviewed for the position of a Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. All that taking place tomorrow. Let's take you back to one of our top stories today, where we've seen in the Northwest the ANC has postponed its provincial elective conference. Our reporter Silwane Kakao is standing by with for us with the latest. Silwane, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. There's obviously been a lot of activity happening since this morning upon the announcement of this postponement of the conference. They have now postponed its ninth provincial elective conference, which was due to be held later this week. As we know, the conference is now expected to be taking place in August to allow for some of the branch disputes processes to be carried out. What are some of the reactions from residents, members at large? What are they saying about this on your end?
Yes, it's been quite a hype of activity, indeed, you're putting it correctly there. We've now seen different members of the ANC gathering at different spots to see, well, those are the ones who could not be at the press conference, but they wanted to hear what was going to come out of the press conference. And so joining me now, as you can see here in the background, the gentlemen here, some members of the ANC representing different branches from the Matlosana sub-region, following that media briefing that we're talking about there, where the ANC in the Northwest made an announcement that the ANC conference in the province will be postponed. Let me get those reactions quickly. Firstly, Ntate, tell us which branch you're representing, and also what are your views or your take on the postponement?
Okay, my name is Lebogang Lobese. I represent Ward 7 in Matlosana sub-region, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda region. Firstly, we welcome the postponement by the IPC of the provincial conference, but must also state that we are not happy about the comrades who will be continuing to be the referee and the players at the same time who serve in the provincial dispute resolution committee. There's no way in the world that those people can be neutral and take decisions against the branches that nominated them. It's not possible. We hope the National Executive Committee and the Interim Provincial Committee will look further into this matter and try to request those comrades to recuse themselves from the process, so that we give this process a credibility that it deserves. The rebuilding of the ANC must be a clean process. There must not be even a single perception that there's a manipulation of guidelines. Of course, we have seen in our branches people who are harvesting ID and tampering with the scanners and all those things. We've played the recordings at that dispute to Kumate Hari and the team, and they've just ignored that recording. That proves that there was a manipulation. Now, how do we say those people are neutral? They've briefed the IPC to say that they've been neutral, but some of us who went through the dispute resolution processes, we can tell them that those comrades are not neutral. You can see how they behave during those hearings. So we welcome the postponement, but we're not happy that IPC want to allow these comrades to continue to be the referees and the players at the same time. If they can recuse themselves, I think process will be credible, and I think we'll be only be happy. We'll continue the process of rebuilding the organization. Moving forward from here, we'll participate in the policy discussions, given the fact that next month we're going to policy conference. It's another process of uniting and rebuilding the organization. But our plea remains, those comrades should recuse themselves. Thank you. Well,
thank you very much there, summarizing us for us. Okay, so we hear the first branch saying that they're not happy with the postponement, but they welcome it. Another branch, sir, where are you from? Which branch, and what is your take on this?
I am Johnny Tiani from Ward 5, previously from Ward 9. And then I think we welcome the postponement of the conference, because when you go back to branches, our branches were not launched whereby we were directly affected by the realignment from Ward 9 to Ward 5. Some of the members were not accepted into the system, but they continue to launch that particular BGM on the 24th of April. So I think we are going back to the basics to say there are members, a lot of members that were excluded from the process that need to unfold in our ward. But I think it's a good day for us to say things were never done good in the ANC, especially in different wards in sub-region and Matozane. So we are saying we are going back to basics, whereby all the members in Gusteni must be able to participate in a particular branch to form a branch so that you can go to conferences.
Well, thank you very much. There another welcoming. Just lastly, as we wrap up, let's talk about the disputes. We know that there were quite a number of disputes. Just take us through that.
Yes, we are not happy. Out of 56 disputes that were launched in this particular province, we noted that a number of branches, it was a deliberate move for them to be subjected to a point where they are not going to participate in the conference because they did not elected people that were sit as members of the disciplinary committee of the province. Now it says clear that whatever the move of postponement of the conference, without taking into consideration the issue of taking out people that got interest into that particular posture, is going to delay the process, because the same people are the same people that needs to come to our branches and unite us. Remember, the branch is the basic unit of the organization. It's where we need to exercise our interest as members of the ANC. Now we are conflicted by people that got interest to lead by fire by force into this particular province. And into that particular basis, we think that the postponement without taking off these people out of the system, that they must never be the referees and the players at the same time, is going to conflict us some time again. But we really plead that the NEC could do much in making sure that after this particular conference, this particular province, it is united, preparatory towards the 2024 coming provincial and national election, by electing a structure that is going to be unifying the entire members of the ANC into this particular province. Now, we are going to send a message very clear that taking the postponement into consideration, not taking off the culprits that are the doable people of this particular shenanigans move and stuff, is not going to be correct. I followed Comrade Chauke correctly so when he was presenting at the media briefing, but I was unhappy because some of the people that does these things now are people that did the manipulation of the candidate selection processes around 2021 local election. So they must be taken off that particular process.
Well, thank you very much for your views due to time constraints. This is where we have to leave it, but you heard from the branches of the ANC in the Matlosana sub-region saying they welcome the postponement. The studio, that's how we wrap up. It's back to you for now.
All right, we'll leave the conversation there. Silwana Kakao again giving us an update. We heard the ANC IPC in the Northwest postponing the conference to August. Let's take a quick ad break and continue with more news and updates on the other side. Welcome back. You are watching The Week Ahead with myself, Liezle Wilson. Let's take a look at other news now making headlines for the week ahead. Around the world, refugees and asylum seekers are suffering from the physical and political effects of COVID-19, which are compounded by circulation of misinformation and discrimination at large. Now, policymakers need to work out now more than ever how to protect their health, safety, and perhaps overall well-being. World Refugee Day honors the strength and courage of refugees and encourages public awareness and support of refugees, people who have had to flee their homelands because of conflict or natural disaster. Advocate Liezle Wilson, chairperson of the SAIRAG, or the Southern African Institute for Responsive and Accountable Governance, is going to be weighing in on World Refugee Day, which obviously is observed on the 20th of June annually. A very good afternoon to you, Advocate Liezle. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you and your viewers.
Let's look at the importance of seeing migrants as agents with dignity and, explore how notions of discrimination often degrade them, perhaps create misperceptions about, their lived reality. What is at stake for refugees, particularly in the SADC region? How do we adequately begin to highlight the plight of this most vulnerable group, including economic migrants and asylum seekers?
Thank you. All of us as nations of the world and members of the UN family, we are obliged to receive and host the refugees in our country. And that's why we have various asylum conventions at UN level as well as African level. That, when people become and apply to be refugees and they're given those status or they're asylum seekers, they must be treated properly. And in terms of our constitution, there should be no difference really between asylum seekers and refugees and nationals other than voting rights. Unfortunately, in our country, due to the problems of non-nationals and corruption, there is and also increasing Afrophobia against African migrants. Then we are clouding the distinction between foreigners, asylum seekers, and people who are undocumented in our country. And I think it's important for us to appreciate this difference and really treat everybody properly, because two things. One, as people of the South, we are also a nation of refugees. But secondly, during the apartheid struggle, many South Africans were also refugees in many other countries. And in terms of the values of our constitution, we have to treat everyone with respect and protect their dignity and rights.
Well, you speak about what's enshrined in the Constitution versus lived reality. Often the two don't always assimilate or go well together. So you've highlighted a few concepts that I want to explore further. But perhaps by looking at your work in your former capacity as CEO of the South African Human Rights Council and perhaps in your new role to date as chairperson of CIRAG, how did COVID-19 affect refugees, asylum seekers or economic migrants, in SADC, even with access to relief grants at large? How would you say the situation was exacerbated?
Well, certainly COVID-19 led to many shutdowns, including access to public services. So, for example, many Home Affairs offices where people have to go to apply for refugees and also, renew their permits were not working properly. And that's why then there were extensions. So basically this had a major setback. But secondly, there were massive economic impacts of COVID-19, which then also has made ordinary people petition of economic pressures. And this is actually also contributing to the increasing levels of xenophobia we're seeing in our country today due to, these economic pressures.
Well, asylum seekers and refugees obviously fleeing dire situations become trapped due to increasingly harsh migration policies and border closures, amongst other things. And I wonder if you could speak to how policymakers can do more to meet their needs. I mean, we're looking at issues of the very documents that they have to apply, for themselves, the conventions that are used. How do we begin to re-envision in relation to this massive challenge that's come to the fore, obviously based on their lived experience and reality?
Yeah, it's sad that, we're beginning to forget where we come from as people of the South, but also our values of Ubuntu, that, we have an obligation, moral obligation to care for visitors and people who are in need of help. And we know that in our region there are problems, which lead to refugees. There are wars in Mozambique. There are conflict in DRC. So obviously there will be people who are fleeing those countries. But at the same time, there are also political challenges in Swaziland, in many other countries, where people are being tortured and people are being persecuted for political views. So they will have to open our doors to them and make sure that we accommodate them properly. But at the same time, that we do need to address the problems, unfortunately, of corruption, which leads to people coming to our country without any documentation. So we need to balance those two issues. But I think it's important for us as South Africans to realize, to appreciate our values as people of the South, is that we have to accommodate refugees. We are bound by international instruments. Our own laws are also very clear that refugees have to be accommodated properly. Yes,
and it brings, with that accommodation, brings a few other issues to the fore. I mean, you earlier on spoke about Afrophobia and xenophobia and discrimination at large. And I was reading an article written by Kavuro, who then spoke about how in South Africa alone, our government does not make higher education funding available to refugee students, for example. So if they want to further their studies, they are then deemed international students. So, I mean, you can imagine what strain and pressure this puts on them to pursue, means of higher education and training. I think it puts them at a disadvantage, and it excludes them also from some of the opportunities perhaps to progress. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that issue. What more could we be doing in that case to assist them?
It is definitely wrong. I mean, as I was saying earlier on, refugees, once they've been accepted in the country, they must be treated like citizens of the country, except they don't have the rights to vote and hold public office. Unfortunately, due to our own internal challenges, we are not really providing full support we should to refugees. And this is why I'm saying, we really need to reflect on who we are and what we're all about, and treat refugees properly. Otherwise, there was no need then for us to have signed these instruments which oblige us to protect refugees.
Let's take the conversation broader. Just in conclusion, tomorrow obviously marking World Refugee Day, and this year it will be focusing on the right to seek safety. And I wonder how significant this theme is in light of how refugees have been treated the world over. I mean, we've obviously seen many instances within Africa, but also extended to Europe, where we've seen the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine.
Yes, unfortunately, refugees all over the world still have a hard time because, again, we are failing to appreciate the need for us to extend a hand of help and a hand of welcome to people who are persecuted elsewhere. Tomorrow it could be us. It was us before. And it's sad that how soon we forget that, many of us had to flee our own country due to political and economic persecutions. And we really need to press the reset button and welcome this and welcome people. Of course, there are economic and social challenges, but that should not give us an excuse then to undermine our own obligations towards refugees.
Advocate Liezle Wilson, thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC. Advocate Liezle Wilson, chairperson of SIRAG, the Southern African Institute for Responsive and Accountable Governance, weighing in on World Refugee Day, which is observed annually on the 20th of June. Let's take another ad break. We'll continue with more on the other side. Right, welcome back. Let's take a look at more stories now at this hour, where tensions continue to rise in the Great Lakes region and East Africa. It comes after the DRC and Rwanda have accused each other of supporting rebel groups hostile to one another. There are growing concerns that an escalation in these tensions could thwart recent gains in stability. Jean Boissa, though, Africa analyst, joins us to weigh in a little bit more. A very good afternoon to you, Jean. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC. Right, John, if you can hear me, I'm just going to perhaps ask you to contextualize what's happened. What's unfolding regarding the diplomatic spat between Rwanda and the DRC to date? Walk us through how we've ended up at this point. All right, let's see if we can reconnect with Jean via a hybrid. Obviously, Jean Boissa is an African analyst, and he's going to be speaking about, the dynamics that are unfolding within the East Africa region, the Great Lakes region as well. I mean, we've seen that tensions have continued to rise in this area. This comes after both the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have accused each other of supporting rebel groups who are hostile to one another. There have been some growing concerns that an escalation in these tensions, in fact, could thwart some of the gains that the region has garnered in terms of instability. Let me just quickly try Jean once again to hear if you can, in fact, connect with us. Jean, if you can hear me, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. For those who've just tuned in, perhaps you can explain what is currently unfolding regarding the diplomatic spat between both Rwanda and the DRC.
All
right, Jean has some technical issues. Let's get him on the telephone line. Again, Jean Boissa, as I mentioned, is the African analyst, and he's going to be chatting a little bit more about that. We are going to take a quick ad break and continue with that conversation on the other side. Welcome back. Let's try that conversation again. Just before the ad break, we saw the tensions are continuing to rise in the Great Lakes region in East Africa, and it comes after the DRC and Rwanda have both accused each other of supporting rebel groups hostile to one another. There are now growing concerns that an escalation in these tensions could thwart recent gains in stability. Jean Boissa is an African analyst, and he joins us for more to discuss further. Jean, if you can hear me, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Let's try this again. Maybe you could explain what is currently unfolding regarding the diplomatic spat between Rwanda and the DRC.
Good afternoon, Liezle. Good afternoon to your viewers and to all Africans involved here. What is happening between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo must not be just seen in the microcosm of the Great Lake regions, but rather on the borderline of the international of a game of chess between the Anglo-Saxon and the French-speaking country, and mainly France. And that's how I would like to say we need to use the correct words. It is not a tension between Rwanda and the Congo. It is a tension of multinationals versus interests that are in the Republic Democratic of the Congo.
All right, thank you for that correction then, John, because now we're obviously speaking about some of those, the vested interests in both of those countries, and I wonder how this is now going to affect the East Africa's region and its stability to date. I mean, we're obviously going to be seeing disruptions of trade flows, perhaps exposure to more opportunistic negative forces, but there's obviously also the issue of conflict minerals and conflict oil as well. Walk us through about how we begin to analyze those dynamics.
Well, we can analyze this dynamic through what evolved in 1994 in Rwanda with what we called the Rwandan genocide. But what we are not talking about is the Congo side. I'm tempted to call it the Congo side because I go against the odd of the general narrative. Why the Congo side? Because what they wanted to play was mainly to dominate and to eradicate and to exterminate the Congolese people, mainly in the eastern side of the region, where the atrocities have been happening since 1997. And we may also recall that that is the very reason for which Laurent Désiré Kabila was killed, assassinated in 2001, because he opposed the invasion of the Rwandan people, the Ugandan people on the soil of the Congo. And today, it is of paramount importance that the Congolese people ask and recall President Felix Tshisekedi for high treason against the nation, because when he is sworn an oath to defend the integrity of the country, he has not done so, and he has not declared a war against Rwanda. It is very important that at this point of time, the president of the Congo revoke the ambassador, Vincent Karagea, who was here in South Africa and was revoked, and we know the reason for which he was revoked in South Africa. So why has Congo to be losing 12 million people, and including today, there have been people that have been killed in the eastern side of Congo, mainly in Kintundu camps, where there are people that are the soldiers that are wounded there. And the M23, we are calling about the M23, which were extinct in 2009 by the former regime, were recalled by himself, Felix Tshisekedi. So that's the reason for which I'm saying it is a treason against the country. He did that in May and July 2019 when he sent his envoy, Claude Ibalanke, to sign the deal and the multilateral deals that are commercial deal, that are military deal between Rwanda, Uganda, and many other countries in the eastern side. And today we have joined the eastern side of Africa, of which have the population been consulted. I don't think that the population of the Congo were consulted by a referendum. So this is a high treason, and it is very important that the Congolese people that are now defending themselves according to the provision 64 of our constitution have to do that at their expense to defend their lands.
Jean, speaking of some of the other countries, neighboring countries, I wonder if you could speak to then what the reactions from both Uganda and Burundi have been, and what impact this is going to have on the region in terms of which sides they're going to be taking as well. Well,
I think that Uganda and Rwanda are mercenaries in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Burundi is more likely observing, and we know that there is no strong sentiment or bond between Burundi and Rwanda. Burundi said that it will defend itself against the Rwandan regime, which is a dictatorship regime. With regard to Uhuru Kenyatta, who recently declared that they needed to create a zone tampon in the eastern side of the Congo. My question to Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta would be, where was he when Congolese were exterminated by 12 million people since 1997? There was no force to come there and defend the Congolese citizens that are also part of the African nations. So it is very important now that we could have a neutral, Congo must have a neutral partner, for instance, SADC, to come on board and ensure that the integrity and the lives of the Congolese people are protected. We, as Congolese, do not want the eastern side, because when Mr. Tshisekedi signs those agreements, he never consulted the population by a referendum. So that's why we say it is about time that Mr. Tshisekedi, who calls himself the president of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, resigns from his position if he has not the mandate that is sworn to defend the citizens of his country.
Jean, let's wrap up this conversation by, just looking at Rwanda's Foreign Affairs Minister Vincent Biruta. In an interview back in May, said if the attacks continue, Rwanda will have the right to respond and to protect the security of the country, to protect the security of its citizens, and that they have the means to do that. What concerns arise from this statement? And in the same breath, you've spoken about the interventions of, from neutral parties, including SADC, etc. But what have been the reactions from the AU to date, or even the international community, to quash what is happening there?
Well, I think the international community, I would quote here one of the French minister who said that there was a security issues in the eastern side of the Democratic of the Republic of the Congo, because the M23 has never existed. It is the Rwandan forces that are disguised as M23 and that are killing the Congolese population. This is the former French minister Jean-Yves Le Drian who declares that. And he speaks about the complicity of the Rwandan regime. So for such an important person to declare those, it is very important that the African Union, that has been mum since the declaration of the war against the Congo, since the invasion of the Congo since 1997, they have said nothing, and it is in their own right for the Congolese people today to rise like men and to defend themselves. And we have seen that young policeman who went himself on the side of Rwanda and started shooting. And we will see more and more kamikazes of the Congolese, because there's a nationalist tension that is rising among the Congolese to defend their land today. For instance, they are boycotting the concert that was supposed to be held onto the 30th June, that is the independence of the Congo. There is no independence in the Congo, because since 1960, the Congo has been at the stakehold of the imperial system. We have seen what we call slavery, colonization, decolonization, but now it is recolonization of the Congo through mercenaries that we call the Rwandan people and the Ugandan people, mainly the Tutsi people. And that's where we're saying that it is very important that a neutral force come on board to just find peace and stability in the Great Lake regions.
All right, thank you very much for your time and for your analysis. Jean Boissa, Africa analyst, chatting to us about the tensions unfolding in that region. Again, tensions arising in the Great Lakes region, and East Africa comes after the DRC and Rwanda have accused each other of supporting rebel groups hostile to the other. We'll leave the conversation there, and again, thank Jean Boissa for his time once again. Let's take another ad break and continue on the other side. Welcome back. Let's take a look at more headlines now on the week ahead. Small businesses in Gauteng are at their wits' end. They say that they are suffocating over the increasing cost of oil and margarine, where over the last 12 weeks, the price of oil alone has almost doubled, leaving them with little profit from their sales.
Amagwinya or fat cakes, a favorite on-the-go breakfast for many workers. Cheap and tasty, but requiring a mega amount of cooking oil. Traders such as Maggie Sitole have made a living selling magwinya for over 20 years. At this busy corner in Benoni, a watering hole for those making their way to work. The future may soon be bleak. This once busy corner rendered empty due to the impact of the crippling oil prices. She says things have really gone up. For example, we use 2 bottles of 5 liters. That means we use 440 rand a day. In a week, this makes about 2,140 rand. Even flour has gone up in a manner that you just cannot imagine. All our commission at this point is going back to the stores to buy supplies. 138 rand. In this township of Guatema, east of Johannesburg, similar sentiments for 70-year-old Sibongile Giane. Giane has plied her trade selling hot chips and kotas. For the last 16 years, this container has helped feed the Giane family and helped put her children through school. The increased cooking oil prices have forced Giane to let go of some of her staff, as she simply cannot afford to pay their salaries anymore or take her children to school.
It has just gone up the way that you don't know what to do anymore. You want to put the price increase on my quotas, but now the problem is people also are not working. We're selling for people that are staying in the location which are not working. Our busiest time is when they got these 350s or the pensioners' money. After that, things are so expensive.
From the informal to formal setups, business owners echo a similar cry. Businesswoman Promise Mashaba says they are pressed on all sides. The continued increases have left little appetite for small businesses.
As the prices of potatoes starting to stabilize, a big one came, which is the oil prices. It is difficult. It is so difficult. It's eating on our bottom line. We've got rent to pay. We've got salaries to pay.
Bakers are facing similar challenges. Maschaba's bakery owners, Thabo and his wife Maschaba Lion, converted their garage into a bakery after they got retrenched. They started selling scones on this busy street. The pair say their business had been growing. However, the last few months brought a nasty surprise, with their preferred brand of margarine doubling in price in less than a month.
The other day I went to one of the shops, I can't mention the name of the shop. I bought a box of wooden spoon for 540 rand. And the following week, it was 800 and some change. So it went up by about 310 rand. So I had to increase my prices. And fortunately, some customers do understand, some don't understand. Because my pack was 120, it went from 120 to 150.
Other bakers say they've had to find creative ways to ensure every worker gets a slice of the pie. Masara Mentlabati says she's had to ask her staff to rotate working days. She says, I have to pay workers, I have to put in fuel, I have to buy stock. And my workers are also breadwinners. It's really a difficult time. I've had to cut their hours, so at least everyone has something to take home. Mahlaku Komani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, let's take a look at other news now, where 960 new cases of COVID-19 have been reported in South Africa. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases says 9 new COVID-19 deaths have also been reported. It now takes the national death toll to 101,598. Active cases now stand at 14,573. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. We from the SABC are also wishing all the fathers, those who are playing a fatherly role, a very happy Father's Day. Thank you very much for serving our nation as well in that regard. But from myself, Liezle Wilson, and the team, until next time, do have a safe week. Take care, and we'll see you soon. It's goodbye for now.